Republican incumbent Mike Simpson has a challenger. Perry Shumway, a Republican, is looking to unseat Congressman Simpson in 2026. He joins me now. Thank you, Perry, for being on the program.
Thank you, Cameron. Thanks for having me.
We'll get into your policy beliefs in a moment, but what inspired you to run for Congress?
You know, I've been where congressional approval was found to be 13% of American voters, super, super low. And that was right during primary season in the U.S. And congressional seats are up for grabs every 2 years. So all members of the House were running for re-election. And I mean, there were 24 out of 222, 24 of them that decided not to run for re-election. The rest, 198, did run. And of those, 196 incumbents won re-election. So there's a huge disconnect between, a 13% approval rate and an almost 100% re-election rate. So I hope to change that, make it harder for incumbents to retain their seats.
Great. There was about 15, 20 seconds where you were frozen a little bit and we didn't get to hear the early first half of the answer. But
I'm so sorry.
No worries.
Not again.
If possible, could you repeat just the first half?
Sure. I'll try to remember what the first half was. So in May 2024, last year, there was a Gallup poll that showed an approval rating for Congress of 13%. So you would think that would result in, a bloodbath in the primary elections. Many, if not all, members of the House would be replaced by challengers. But in fact, the opposite was the case. In spite of only 13% approval, virtually every member of the House that ran for re-election was re-elected. Out of 198 incumbents that sought re-election, only 2 did not win. So that's a huge disconnect to me. That's showing that something is wrong with the system. There are too many advantages that keep incumbents in office, and I intend to take those advantages away.
Even though you intend to upend the status quo, the incumbents in Congress, you do say on your Ballotpedia Candidate Connection survey that you would model yourself after an incumbent named Thomas Massie, the congressman from Kentucky. What do you see in him that you would like to adopt yourself as a potential member of Congress?
He's one who has great integrity. He's not afraid to go against the entire body when he knows that what he's standing for is right, in particular with relation to federal spending and the national debt. I very much feel the same way. So much of my enthusiasm for removing the advantage of incumbency is because I think that with lots more fresh faces, we will tackle things like the national debt and federal spending in a better way.
Let's dive into some of your policy beliefs. Let's start with healthcare. You say on your campaign website, it's time to make healthcare truly free market. What would that look like in your ideal situation?
Yeah, so for one thing, I want to change the tax code. Right now, the tax code incentivizes employers to provide health insurance to their employees. There's no logical or market or economic reason for that to be the case. It's just something that's been in place since right after World War II. I would want to make it so that employers could no longer write off the expenses of covering health insurance, and that individuals could, so that we as consumers would shop as individuals rather than getting it through our employers. That's a tax code change. In addition to that, I would want to sponsor legislation, perhaps even an amendment to the Constitution, saying that states cannot, nor the federal government cannot require any kind of medical licensing or certification, either for a medical school or for a person practicing medicine. That's not to say that people can lie or cheat about their credentials or their qualifications. Consumers could still require, doctors who attended certified schools and so on. But if somebody wants to visit a doctor who is not qualified in that way, but still somebody this person wants to visit, that person should be free to do that without the government stepping in and saying they can't.
If you remove those requirements and a consumer of healthcare gets burned or they really get manipulated, would you have a policy in place to protect those individuals in a free market system?
The market itself protects them. Whoever burns them immediately goes out of business and nobody ever uses that person again. That person would have to get a different career. If the person causes harm to the patient, then certainly the person that caused the harm should be held fully accountable by the law. So, we rely on the government to protect us from getting burned, yet people still do get burned. It's better if the market does it.
So market forces are adequate enough to help and to help all consumers of healthcare.
Absolutely, yes. Yeah. Those consumers, we could try to protect them through the courts or through regulation, but there are other industries like the tech industry in the US where, if somebody buys a cheapo cell phone and it doesn't work and they hate it, they're going to leave a bad review. The company that makes that cell phone is going to go out of business. Nobody's going to buy that cell phone anymore. It's entirely market driven and it works fine. And the healthcare industry could be and should be the same way.
How would you respond to those who will say we assign a different moral value to healthcare than a consumer product like a phone?
We do assign a different moral value to it. That doesn't mean that government suddenly is more moral than the free market. Government is just comprised of individuals who are self-interested the same way that people that compete in a market are. There's nothing inherently superior morally about government employees and government regulations. So, just because one industry is more impactful in our lives than another doesn't mean that one therefore needs to have government regulation where the other does not.
And you have said on your campaign website that you believe in medical tort reform. What kind of medical tort reform would you like to see?
Caps on medical liability, on lawsuits, maybe, let's say $1 million, so that the insurance that doctors have to pay for could go way down. It's very unreliable to expect that a nationwide industry can be held to the whims of juries that could be swayed in radical different directions. So it's not that people don't have rights, but if a lady gets hot coffee spilled on her just because it was McDonald's that did it, doesn't mean that suddenly she should get millions and millions of dollars. When juries make awards like that, we all suffer. Costs go up, prices go up. If there were caps on lawsuits, it would bring the price way down. The whole problem with healthcare in America is not whether people are or are not covered by insurance or the ACA. It's just the cost. The cost is astronomically high. It's ridiculously high. Everybody knows that. Nobody wants to do what it takes to bring the cost down. We don't bring it down through legislation. We don't pass laws. We don't mandate certain prices. We simply let the market forces take over and have individual consumers choose, and then the providers of healthcare have to compete. That's by far the best way.
Can you still and you talk about cost being the number one or being such a big issue with our healthcare system, but what about those at the very bottom of the economic hierarchy? Can they, in a free market system, can they still have access to healthcare?
Not by themselves. There are definitely people in this country that are too poor to be able to afford it, even if the price comes way, way down. Uh, so it is our responsibility, our duty as citizens in this country, as human beings, to care for our neighbors, our family, our friends, our loved ones. But we should do that voluntarily and not compulsorily. So I'm just not in favor of the government saying we're going to tax everybody. We're going to take this money or this property by force so that we can, in our own way, decide who it should go to healthcare wise and provide those benefits to them. I'm not in favor of money being taken out of our paychecks for Social Security or Medicare. I think that all of those things should be voluntary.
Last question on healthcare before we move on to your other policy, to other issues on the policy platform. When it comes to working with others in Congress on this issue, there are those in Congress who are in office that believe in universal, single payer, government run healthcare. You clearly don't believe that. How would you work with people who hold those beliefs?
I would try my hardest to persuade them to come to the true side of the equation. There's no way that I would ever be able to be persuaded to vote for a single payer or anything remotely similar. I think the system that we have right now is a disaster. It's a train wreck, and it doesn't have to be that way. I simply could not be persuaded to ever vote for perpetuating the system we have now or making it, have increased government involvement. To me, those are the antithesis of what is needed in the market. So I would just try through gentle means to persuade my fellows to join me on that.
Let's transition to your views on the minimum wage. You say on your campaign website, minimum wage laws hurt the very people they aim to protect. How do minimum wage laws hurt the people they aim to protect?
That's a great question. So, right now, the federal minimum wage, and in Idaho, the Idaho minimum wage also is, it hasn't been changed since I think the early 2000s, and I think it's $7.25 an hour. I have a high schooler. I don't know of anybody who's paid that low. I don't doubt that there's somebody in Idaho, probably somewhere, that is paid $7.25 an hour. But the average wage, I think I looked it up the other day, was like $26 an hour in Idaho. Virtually all employers pay much higher than the minimum wage right now, and nobody is making them do that. Nobody's forcing them to do that. There's no law that says you have to, and yet they still do. They choose to, obviously, because if they didn't, they wouldn't have employees. And that's how it is supposed to work, and that's how it works. People argue about a living wage. If we were to raise the minimum wage to a living wage, it would have to be substantially increased, maybe triple the amount that it is now or more. If we were to do that, the businesses that would most be impacted are the very businesses that, the businesses that have the lowest paid employees in our society: grocery stores, restaurants, especially mom and pop restaurants, little bookstores, shops, small retail shops, etc. Those stores typically are frequented by shoppers who are low income. The moment that I go to those stores and say, you have to start paying your employees 3 times what you've been paying them, or double, or whatever, way more than you've been paying them, there's such a low profit margin already that the owners of those businesses are going to say, okay, this extra money to pay these employees extra has to come from somewhere. So if it's a restaurant, I had a restaurant for a couple of years in Rexburg, a teriyaki restaurant that went out of business. But I had well over 50 employees. Almost all of them were college students, very low paid, yet they were happy to work for me and have that job. If you were to have come to me and said, you have to double what you're paying all your employees, then I would have had to say, either I go out of business, or I substantially decrease the portion size of the food that I'm offering, or I double the price of my food, or I hire far fewer employees or let a bunch of these people go. But I would have to do something. I was not making money in this business. And if you were to impose this on me, I would be losing all the more. So I would have to make big cuts somewhere. And who would suffer from those cuts? Not the rich people living up on the bench in Rexburg. They wouldn't care. It would be the college students who came in and ate my teriyaki every day because now the price is double, or the portion is smaller, or a bunch of them can't work for me anymore. So it's well-intentioned. I get that people want to help, but when the government steps in and does that, it can be far more harmful than beneficial.
So you fundamentally believe that minimum wage laws hurt small businesses?
100%. Yeah. Not just small businesses, but they definitely hurt small businesses. They hurt the whole economy. They are far more detrimental than they are helpful. And they're not needed. It's obvious. They're not needed in Idaho right now. So when minimum wage laws are in place, they remove incentives for people to move up the ladder and to try to improve their skill set and do better. People get stuck in a rut, and they make it so that employers can't ever give pay raises because they're already tapped out. So every employee, the good ones and the bad ones, all make the same amount of money. It really, really messes things up in ways that the people who propose these kinds of laws don't anticipate, don't think through.
How would you respond to critics who say, point taken regarding small businesses, but Walmart has a lot of free cash flow. They can afford to pay more than they currently do. And that's why we should have the federal minimum wage. What would be your argument against that?
So if we were to impose the minimum wage on Walmart, we would have to impose it on all businesses. And if we impose it on all businesses, it will definitely have an impact on employment. It will have an impact on pricing. It could potentially lead to inflation. It could lead to higher unemployment. It would have lots of negative effects, even from the large businesses. Not all businesses are Walmart and are profitable and wealthy, but they'd all be subject to the law. And if they started raising their prices, Walmart would too.
And lastly, on this issue, you would be running for a federal position in Congress, going to Congress, but certain states may want to have their own minimum wage set. As a potential member of Congress, would you try to stand in the way of states who want to enact minimum wage legislation?
Absolutely not. I would not support any legislation telling states what they can and can't do in that regard, but I would urge them to not pass those laws, but I certainly wouldn't prohibit them from doing it if that was their choice.
From the minimum wage to foreign affairs, foreign policy, on your campaign website, you say that America has a win-lose mentality, almost like sports when it comes to foreign affairs, very zero sum. And you're a free trade advocate. You talk about the so-called enemy states, nation states like Iran and Venezuela, and that maybe having more trade relations with these kinds of nations could benefit America. So I'll just ask you point blank, should America have formal trade relations with Iran and Venezuela?
Yes. Yeah. It's not doing us any good to not trade with them. We have punished Cuba for how many years now? The revolution was 1959, I think. So 60 some years. Anyway, longer than that, for a very long time, by not allowing trade, not allowing people to go there on vacation, where it was a very popular place for that in the 1930s and 40s. And it hasn't caused Cuba to stop being a communist nation. It hasn't caused Cuba to stop being our enemy, quote unquote. It hasn't done any good. It's done a lot of bad. If there's one thing that's going to make the Cuban people feel like we don't want to be under the burden of communism any longer, it's going to be that their eyes are opened to what it's like to live in a free nation like ours. And they'll only have those eyes open that way if they interact with us. The more, the better. If we can travel there, they can travel here. We can trade freely as freely choosing individuals. That far outweighs the negative. So even with so-called enemy states, we can have a much stronger relationship with them if we freely and openly trade with them.
What about those who may be concerned about the security interests that, like Iran and Venezuela may have different security interests in the United States. So why even think about trading with a nation that has different security interests than the United States?
I think the more that we trade with them, the more open we are with them, the more free we are with them, their security interests will change over time, and they'll become more friendly to us. Iran, in the days of the Shah, before the Ayatollahs took over, was much more Western, much more open in their approach, and we had a better relationship with them that we no longer have. I would love to get back to those old days like that.
Let's talk about something that has become sort of a dividing line within the Republican Party lately after the October 7th, 2023 attacks by Hamas on Israel. There's been talks about what America's relationship with Israel should look like. You say on a video that, quote, "I will not receive donations from AIPAC, the American Israel Public Affairs Committee." Why not?
I don't think that Israel is an inherently evil nation state, and they have long been a strong ally of ours in the Middle East. They're a democracy. I'm fully supportive and appreciative of those things. I'm also very sympathetic to the Palestinian people and their plight and the large number of deaths that have occurred there since October a couple of years ago. But for the bigger picture, it's less about whether Israel is right or wrong or Palestine is right or wrong. It's more to me about this concept of foreign aid, which is, if you think about it, some people in Washington, D.C. saying we are going to, through compulsory means, take property from all the American citizens through taxation or increasing our debt. Either way, we're going to take from a bunch of Americans and we're going to send it around the world to some conflict that we think deserves American money, irrespective of how the American people feel about it. Maybe they support it, maybe they don't, it doesn't matter. We're going to take their money and we're going to send it to some cause that we think is just. I will tell you, Cameron, there are so many causes around the world that are just and that deserve funding. Israel and Gaza are just one among many. There are so many conflicts in sub-Saharan Africa right now that we hardly pay any attention to. All of them deserving of money, let alone all of the humanitarian crises that are happening. And I'm not opposed to sending money to those things, but it should be individual citizens sending that money voluntarily because they believe in the cause. It should never be compulsory or forced. It should be voluntary.
How are you going to deal with those who will say that you like Israel, but that you should just take money from AIPAC because that's just been the norm in elections and election cycles? What's your response to that?
If I accept money from AIPAC, it's, I think, with the implicit understanding that I'm going to vote favorably on bills that fund Israel's war effort, Israel's government. I'm not going to vote for those things. So it would be very immoral for me to take campaign donations from an organization that I would not do what they want me to do in Congress.
And do you feel that America's relationship with Israel has become has it become too tight? Do you think there needs to be any reform in terms of the relationship between both of these nations?
No. I love Israel. I think in many ways it is a fantastic ally for us. I want us to continue to have a strong relationship with them. I would love to have, just like with other nations, a great trading relationship. Even trading military stuff, I'm not opposed to that. but not through our government, just through private means.
And last thing, we'll get to you. You also believe in not sending federal money to Ukraine as well, and you say that it should be individuals, similar to the Israel issue. It should be individuals. If they want to donate, they can. How would you also? What would your message be to critics who disagree with you there as well?
Just like with the conflict in Gaza, there are strong arguments to be made on both sides. I know it doesn't seem like you can make an argument in favor of what Putin has done, but Ukraine is not lily white. They have been problematic in the past. They've made some questionable choices, and their alliances have not always been as strongly democratic as we would like them to be. They're not perfect. I'm not a fan of Putin's invasion by any means. I think I do understand the reasons why he did it. That's not to excuse it or defend it, but because it's not a black and white issue, and it has nothing to do with American sovereignty or with threatening us on our soil. It's just morally wrong for me or anybody in Washington to force the American people to give money to one side or the other of that conflict. If individuals want to send their own hard-earned money to Zelensky, that's great. That's wonderful, but should not be forced.
And last of all, in terms of the foreign policy front, and then we'll get your last words before we end the program. Do you think that a free trade, because you are a free trade advocate, that a free trade society will lead to less wars and less conflicts around the world?
100% yes. 100% yes. It's very troubling to me when our president talks about big tariffs on Brazil or China or the BRIC nations. That just makes it shuts people off internationally from us. It doesn't help either economy. It does not really protect our industry or make it more efficient or more cost competitive. It doesn't help consumers. But even worse than that, it just gives us enemies all around the globe. It's not like if we impose these huge tariffs that they're going to love us. They're going to resent that we give other people lower tariff rates. Will it result in them eventually lowering their tariffs on our goods? Maybe. And if so, I guess that's okay. But I would much rather go to them and say, hey, let's both have zero tariffs and let's be friends through trade. Let's become so intertwined in our economies that we wouldn't think of attacking each other. And even our philosophies over time might merge more closely as we get to know and understand each other better. Trade is just such a great panacea for so many of the world's ills, I believe.
Before we end the interview, every candidate gets a chance to share their last thoughts. So is there anything that you would like to add before we end the interview?
Sure, briefly. I'll just say I'm running against a guy in Idaho named Mike Simpson, who has been in office in Congress for 26 years. He's been a politician for 44 years. I've never met him, but he seems like a nice guy. There are things that stances that he has on some issues that I completely agree with, but he is a very big spender in my view. And for that, many online organizations give him very middling or moderate ratings rather than saying he's a staunch conservative, wherever. I'm running against him because I think he's been in office long enough, and I think that he has spent too much money and that our national debt has become way, way, way too big. If we can exercise enough restraint to allow the debt to get paid off over time and not keep adding to it, the dollar could become stronger. We can have an amazing economy. And if we don't rely on tariffs, but we have a free trade economy where we pay off our national debt, the whole nation can be so much better off, wealthier, happier. If we do the things that I'm talking about to lower the cost of healthcare, we can all just live wonderful, wonderful lives of freedom, and we will all have so much excess that it will not be hard for us to take care of our own poor in our families, with our neighbors, and the country will thrive and prosper in ways that we only dream about. So that's what I dream about. That's what I want to help happen in this country.
Perry Shumway, thank you for taking the time to do this interview, and best of luck to you in your campaign.
Thank you, Cameron. I sure appreciate it.
Thank you. That's the end of the interview.